just wondered how you would handle, I have a couple questions. I wonder how you would handle someone from Philadelphia, say, coming to Abington to be educated using, let's say, the grandparents' address. How would you handle something like that?
Oh, Dr. Sickle, would you?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. The school code is very clear. Children go to school where their parents reside. So the first thing we would have to look into is finding out where their parents reside. Now, there are exceptions, and those exceptions relate to what's called affidavits of responsibility or affidavits of guardianship. So there's a process that you have to go through. So it's a difficult question for me to answer because there's lots of different scenarios, but I can share with you we actively pursue non-residents, and if we find a non-resident does not reside in Abington, we actively work on the expulsion process. Where that comes from is a lot of tips from citizens calling my office and saying such and such who's on my street doesn't live here, lives with mom who lives in wherever, and we pursue them.
How do you handle that? Like, do you charge them for the...
Yes, we do two things. One, we actively move towards removing them from the rolls of the Abington School District because they're not entitled to an Abington education unless they reside in Abington or Rockledge. And two, depending on the circumstances, sometimes we do go after back tuition.
The reason I'm asking is I don't know whether you're aware that we had 60,000 minors come over our border last year, and we had them secretly transferred, some of them to Roslyn under the Lutheran Children's Services. And we asked Madeline Dean to check that out, to find out how many were there and what they were doing with them until they were placed. And when Madeline Dean got back to us, she said that there were less than 9. So if there were 9, I mean less than 10. So if there were 9 at say 12,000 a year, that's 108,000 a year,
Yes.
plus ESL services and so forth. So what do you do in that situation?
And again, it really pertains to where they live and if they have the legal right to go to school in Abington. Each case is different, so we'd have to review it on a case-by-case basis. I'm not familiar with what you're addressing. If you have information, I'd like you to give it to Mrs. Doherty, our Assistant Board Secretary, so we can follow it up. But we actively pursue non-residents. That comes out of Mrs. Bomsey's Pupil Services Office, as well as the Child Accounting Office that works with Mr. Lionetti, and we actively remove students from our rolls.
I was just wondering, could you sue the Lutheran Services for bringing these children in to be educated? They're getting millions of dollars from the government to place these children.
I am not an attorney and can't provide that answer, and Mr. O'Donoghue, I don't know if you'd like to provide an answer or not.
Yeah, yeah. It just is, if you're charging American citizens for something like that, and these people are coming here illegally, doesn't seem fair to charge the taxpayer for something like that. My second question is this: I was here last year, and I asked you if you used Common Core, and you said no, we have our own standards. But anyway, when I was looking at my grandchildren's math, it looks like Common Core math. And I was wondering if you have adopted any Common Core curricula for your standards.
Dr. Sickle, go ahead.
Sure, I remember you addressed us last year in exactly that. And what I shared with you at the time is that Common Core is not a curriculum. Common Core is a set of national standards. Pennsylvania has not adopted the Common Core. Pennsylvania has its own standards known as the PA Core. PA standards, PA Core, call it what you would like. Essentially what this means, it's not a common curriculum, but if I was to describe it in a general sense to you, algebra should be the same whether you take an algebra course in Abington, PA, in Pittsburgh, PA, in Jackson, Mississippi, in Selma, Alabama, in Miami, Florida. You see where I'm going across the country. Algebra should be algebra, should be algebra. And when you get a grade in algebra, it should be based on proficiency standards that are demonstratable and common across the country, why it's known as a Common Core. We have not adopted the Common Core. Our curriculum, K-12, meets, or I want to change that, exceeds the Pennsylvania standards.
But did you adopt any
No, we did not.
You have none of that in.
Abington has not. I don't believe the 500 school districts in Pennsylvania have because they're not required to.
I also wanted to ask, when you have your standards, do you share that with the government, like personal stuff, that, you know, medical backgrounds and so forth for children? A lot of these Common Core things are.
No, we are clearly governed by, I guess the best way to put it would be the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and we don't release any of that type of information. We're permitted by law to release directory information, which is what? Name and, why don't you share it, Mr. O'Donoghue? I don't want to overspeak.
There's two different concepts, I believe. One is information that is shared with the state, and there is certain information that is required to be shared with the state regarding individuals. The other, in terms of disclosure to anyone else, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act protects that student information from disclosure. School districts are permitted to disclose directory information, generally name, grade level, in some cases address. The parents have a right to opt out of that information being designated at the beginning of each school year. But that's essentially what you can release.
When you say opt out, I mean, what kind of opting out do you do?
I send a letter home in the beginning of every school year to every Abington student and explain the family's rights under the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and if they do not want their information released, they need to contact the building principal.
Thank you very much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
I hope that's helpful because I know you've had a lot of questions and we're happy to address them.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.